What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you my Mad Scientist build for the Outer Worlds. So, the Mad Scientist is all about using the science weapon's crazy effects, as well as inspiring your companions to do some crazy things themselves, and just having a blast with combat. So, obviously, as the name can probably tell you, combat gets a little crazy. So, before we can go into literally anything else, I have to kind of go over the science weapons for any of this to make any kind of sense. So, most builds, they usually focus on one weapon type or something like that, but there's 5 science weapons in the game. They're easy to find. There's a quest that leads you to literally all of them. So getting them isn't really the issue. There's actually a couple you can get like pretty close to the start of the game, like right after the introductory area. The problem comes with the fact that like every single one of them is a different weapon type. We have the Prismatic Hammer, which is a 2-handed melee, the mandibular rearranger, which is a 1-handed melee. We have the Gloop gun, which is heavy weapons. We have the mind control ray, which is a long gun, and the shrink ray, which is, of course, a handgun. So, right off the bat, I don't recommend using the mind control ray for this. It's difficult to use, as you can probably see on screen. It's just a pain. It does the least damage out of all of the science weapons. The mind control effect drops almost immediately after you stop using the weapon, so it's hard to get the enemies to actually fight each other with it. It just doesn't work well. So I don't recommend using that one. So that leaves us with the Prismatic Hammer, the Mandibular Rearranger, the Gloop gun, and the Shrink Ray. So the Shrink Ray, of course, shrinks things. I'm hopefully going to have some footage in the background so some of this stuff makes more sense as I'm saying it. The Gloop gun throws enemies up into the air as well as electrocutes them and keeps them stunned in the air for a second. The Mandibular Rearranger on human targets actually rearranges their face, like their whole face, like it'll change as you hit them, which is hilarious. But on regular enemies, if you hit them enough times, it'll actually freeze them in place, so it offers some crowd control. And the Prismatic Hammer, which is our main damage weapon in this build for the science weapons, because it does the most damage, it cycles damage types. So every time you hit something, the damage type will change depending on your science skill. So that brings me to my next point, and the main reason I wanted to start out talking about these science weapons. If you click into them, you can read the description, and all of them will mention your skill in science. So if we come over to our skills page and we scroll down to science, we can see that it has some interesting weapon effects. So science directly affects how often the weapon effects on the science weapons actually trigger, up to a maximum of about 45% extra. Now, in addition to that, at the end there of the 80 base skill perk that you can see, the tinkering cost for science weapon is capped, and it actually caps it at 200 bits. So that makes it easy to max literally every single one of them out at their maximum level, which is 35. You can go 5 levels past whatever your level is. So at max level, which is 30, you can get all of these weapons to 35 and give them the most damage. Having your science skill at 100 basically is what allows this to work. So it gives you extra weapon effects on the science weapons, as well as lets you carry them through the entire game. Because when you find all of them, they're pretty low level. Like, I think the highest one you find is like level 12. With that brief explanation of the science weapons, and hopefully I put some footage on the back of this so you can kind of see them in action, hopefully that you kind of understand a bit more about how the science weapons work in terms of skills. And now we can jump into my normal spiel as far as character building goes. So that's going to bring us to our attributes page. Sorry if you guys see me kind of jumping around between characters. I actually tested this on quite a different amount of them. So starting out with the attributes I recommend getting. So first of all, put your temperament below average. You don't need passive health regeneration. It's honestly not useful. And this skill determines basically like nothing. This is probably the most useless skill in the game. I actually recommend putting this below average for like most builds, because you don't need the passive health regeneration. Even if you do have it, it restores very little health. With that in mind, again, we're using a lot of different damage types, so our attributes are kind of spread here. So put temperament below average to give you an extra point. And then I recommend spreading them across intelligence, dexterity, and strength. So strength and dexterity at high. This is going to give us extra melee damage as well as some carry capacity. Our melee attack speed goes up, our ranged weapon reload speed goes up with dexterity, and intelligence increases our crit chance. So the reason we put intelligence at very high, or at least me personally, is so that we can get the extra medical and science up as quickly as possible. And then strength is our main damage dealer, so we want the extra melee damage from strength. So we're a little spread out compared to most of the builds, but this is kind of what I recommend as far as attributes go. Now, in terms of skills, I recommend putting Inspiration to 20. So putting Inspiration at 20 is going to let us unlock companion abilities. So my kind of whole thinking with this build is that we're a mad scientist and we're kind of inspiring the people with us to also do crazy things, which is their companion abilities. Now we're not going to roll deep into this at all. So we're going to hit 20, give us our companion abilities, and that's pretty much it. And then we're going to have some perk choices that kind of let us use those more often, but we'll get into that later. So then of course we're going to put science at 100, like I mentioned, for obvious reasons. And then we're going to put actually 100 in medical. So the reason we want to do this is we're going to be in the fray a lot. We're going to be getting hit a lot. So we want as much healing from our inhaler as possible. So we're going to put medical at 100, which is going to give us actually some extra damage against humans at master tier, as well as unlock the drug mixing slots for the inhaler. So if you're unaware, your inhaler can actually be, in addition to its regular healing, you can actually put other stimulants in there, like adrenatime, and this will give you extra movement speed, melee weapon attack speed, but when you crash, you'll get attributes. So this is kind of like the drug addict way to go. So basically you can use these stimulants, if you'll call them that, throw them into your medical inhaler as long as you have 100 medical, and then you can kind of get some extra effects. A lot of them actually don't have downsides, so keep that in mind. There's all sorts of cool stuff you can do there. It just kind of adds to the craziness of this build, which is why I recommend it. So from there, this is where it gets a little interesting. So we have a lot of weapon choices. Now, I don't recommend putting more than 60 in any of the 4 we're using. You can ignore long guns because, again, that's the mind control ray. It's only at 50 because we kind of have to put it there to get handguns and heavy weapons to 60. So most weapons give you their best stuff at 60. So our melee, this is going to give us our power attacks, our tactical time dilation location hits, and more importantly, for two-handed, it's going to make our attacks unblockable. And for one-handed, it's going to give us an extra 30% reach. So because we're using so many weapons, it's just useless to specialize in every single one of them. So we're using one-handed, two-handed, handguns, and heavy weapons. So with handguns, we'll get 10% minimum armor penetration as well as extra crit chance. Then heavy weapons will give us extra crit chance and a better reload speed. So yes, the 80 and 100 master tier are pretty good, and as you can see, even with all this spread out, I actually have an extra 32 points to spend. So if you want to put anything a little higher as far as your weapons go, you totally feel free. I just didn't personally find in my testing that putting it above 60 mattered at all. So keep that in mind. Personally, I would recommend dropping the extra 32 points into something like dialogue or stealth myself, but do whatever you want to do. It's fun either way. These extra 32 points, spend them however you want. They don't really affect the build in much besides a specific way for you. So that is it for skills, guys. Those are kind of the things we're looking at, the things we want to do. So moving on to perks. So perks, there's only 2 that are important for damage, actually. So in tier 2, we want weird science, and in tier 3, we want wild science. This is going to, and they do stack, by the way, they double our science weapon damage, which is obviously huge, right? So the thing is, from there, we're pretty much picking perks that are kind of useful to us, but the rest of them aren't super necessary, so you actually have a lot of leeway here. Personally, I like to pick up Toughness, which is going to give us 50% extra base health. Slow the World is going to give us extra TTD meter. Pack Mule gives us extra carry capacity. Resilient is going to give us extra armor rating. And Precision is going to give our companions extra crit chance, which I'll get into in just a second, but obviously that's useful for pretty much everybody. Then, of course, that'll bring us to Tier 2. Weird Science, of course, like I just mentioned, and then I recommend getting We Band of Brothers, Tag Team, and Rolling Thunder. This is going to be letting our companions do crits constantly. Well, not crits, but their abilities constantly. So, again, my thinking was like, this guy is crazy and he's inspiring his companions to also do crazy things. So I really kind of liked how that played out. And then, of course, Harvester is just really good. Whenever you kill an enemy, you get 15% of your health restored per kill. It's just very useful because we're up in the fray. We're getting hit quite a bit with this build, so anything you can do to get more health is very useful. And that brings us to Tier 3. So, of course, Wild Science again, because we need it for the damage. And then the other ones I like to get because, again, we're up in the melee. I like to pick up Armor Master for the extra armor rating and skill bonuses. I like to get Tit for Tat, which gives us 15% of our melee damage returned as health. I like to get Don't Go Dying on Me, which means if you use your inhaler while you have a downed companion, it will revive them. And then I like to get Revenge as well. Whenever we're affected by a harmful combat effect, you deal increased damage, because again, we're up in the fray, we're getting hit a lot. This basically is a free 20% damage for the build. So, as you can see at the top, that actually leaves us with 3. That is because my character, this particular character, has 3 flaws that I picked up. So, in theory, everything I'm showing you is the max level number of perks without taking any flaws. So if you choose to take any flaws, a couple of them are actually pretty fun. You can actually pick up some more perks that way. But these are the ones I would recommend getting with our actual leveled perk abilities. So that brings us to our inventory. Now, weapons we already covered pretty extensively. So jumping over to our armor. Now, as you probably heard me mention, the Prismatic Hammer is our primary source of damage. So because of that, I actually recommend using the Iconoclast unique armors that you get for doing the Iconoclast quests on Monarch. These are quest rewards from the Iconoclasts. So the Apostle Armor, and you cannot change these mods because they are unique items. It's going to give you extra melee weapon and defense skills as well as some extra carry capacity. And the helmet is going to give you just straight up 5% melee damage, which is great. So again, we're using these because the Prismatic Hammer is our primary damage dealer. Until you get these, I just recommend using kind of any armor you find that is useful. Now you get these at actually a fairly low level, but because we have science and it reduces the tinkering cost so much, we can pump these up to a very high level and get these great bonuses. Like, even though these are level 24 and 23 as opposed to 35, like this is in-game amounts of armor. Totally worth it. Now, if you would prefer to make one of the handgun or heavy weapon or the one-handed melee, obviously this works with the one-handed melee, but with the shrink ray and the gloop gun, if you would prefer to use those more extensively, all you got to do is switch out armor that makes it useful for that. But personally, these are the 2 that I recommend. Now, one last thing I wanted to mention. Because we are using our companions for their abilities, I wanted to give a quick tip that is A, remember to set your companions AI, because we're using them, they're important. All you gotta do is set their AI under this little name badge under their name on your menu screen. So you can set their AI real quick. And then for perks, get perks that A, allow them to reset their abilities, and anything that's useful to you. I personally like to use Ellie, guaranteed, because she gives you this, these 2 right here. She'll give you extra medical inhaler heal, as well as if you die, you can be restored to 25% health once in a while, once every 5 minutes specifically. So personally, Ellie, I would say, is someone you really want to have around for this build, but everybody else just kind of focus on the 2 abilities that let you reset their ability cooldown, and beyond that, it's pretty much choice. So that's it. That is pretty much it, guys. I've got some gameplay in the background. You can kind of see how this plays. It's super fun. You kind of just jump into the fray using all sorts of these crazy science weapon effects. Personally, this is hands down the most fun I've had playing this game. My other builds have been fun. The sniper was great at killing things. Like, he kind of easy moded the game for me. Like, it was just super easy with that guy. And then, of course, I had the leadership build was fun, but it's a little hands-off just by the nature of it. But this build is just hilarious and fun. Like, every combat encounter is just great. So, with that said, I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please like, comment, and subscribe. I hope you stick around, but if not, have a great day either way.
Time for a drink?